All right, I figured make a video on this subject. Maybe you're looking at a bucket truck. You don't really know what you're looking at or what to buy. And so I'm going to go over some of the things that are, some of the ideas and things like that to think about before you buy one. Maybe you're not sure, what you're looking at, or there's a lot of different things to know about these. One of them is the cab and chassis that it's on, and the other one's the lift. Okay, so there's basically going to be two parts to the video, and I encourage you to listen to both parts of it, especially if you're in the state of California, because California has very strict rules on diesels, and you can only pretty soon, I don't know if it's all the way in place, but within the next 2 years or so, the only thing you'll be able to have on the roads in California is a 2010 or newer truck cab and chassis. So we'll go over this stuff later in the video, but first I'm going to talk about the lifts. Okay, there's a lot of different lift companies. There's like Versa Lift, there's Alltech, there's Tesla, Nifty Lift. There's like 100 different lift companies. I'm trying to think of the different names. But the most common ones are VersaLift and Alltech. Okay, those are and probably the parts are most available for those. The thing about VersaLift that's good and bad is a lot of the parts are dealer only. Alltech has more aftermarket parts, but because the parts are mostly dealer only for the VersaLift, the quality is a little bit better. So I found people say that they had their long piece, what's it called, the extend retract, go out a lot on the Alltechs, and I think it's because the aftermarket parts are not as good. So that's an issue with some of them, and it's kind of an expensive problem if you have that one. The one that extends and contracts is probably the most expensive one to service. Most of the parts you can actually do if you learn how to do cylinder repair. You can actually do that yourself. It's not that hard. Like this truck right here has an O-ring around the cylinder that needs to be replaced. It's actually a very easy job to do. I just don't really have time to do it right now because I have 3 trucks and I have a lot of a lot of things to work on right now, a lot of cars and stuff. So the things about the lift, okay, there's basically almost every different company has a version of the same lift. Okay, this is a TEL 29. It's non-insulated. They have ones that are insulated. Insulated ones usually will have a section. I'll show you what it's like. Insulated will usually have a section that looks kind of like this block right here on this one. And what it does is it isolates the upper part from the lower part of the boom so that electric power can't transfer from the upper portion to the ground. Because say when you have the outriggers down on this one, it is grounded, and if you're working on something that's got high energy electrical, then that can be dangerous without an insulated boom. And not everybody's going to be needing that, but sometimes it's nice to have. So lots of different companies, Alltech and VersaLift, have the most common, most prevalent ones out there of this boom here, and this is a single section boom. Okay, you're going to see people say that anything from this boom is a 29-foot boom to a 40-foot boom, and it's all the same thing. Even different brands, they're just made slightly different. Most of them have the same reach and height, and I've seen people get misled on what this boom does. So your standing height on this is 29 feet. That means when I'm standing on that platform and it's straight up in the air, I'm at 29 feet. That's how that works. And it's always a good idea, if you get the lift number, go to the company that makes its website, put that lift number in, and you can usually find specifications on how far the outward reach is of the lift, the height of the lift, and it'll show like the lift going all the way from down to the all the way up position, and how far out it's going to be from whatever you're working on. And there's two basic important things to know on that: is your height and your outward reach. So your outward reach is going to matter depending on how close you can get to whatever you're working on. So for instance, if you're doing sign business, outward reach, sometimes going out over awnings or over a sidewalk or something like that, you're going to want something that you can get from further away. So sometimes it's better to have the extra section that's on that truck versus the straight boom, which on this one. The basic thing on most of the lifts, that upper section, this one has a double section, so one section goes up, and then it has that upper section that you see with the basket on it. That part is usually very similar between one company and another. So like the TEL29 that's on the other truck basically has this boom. It's a variated version of it. This boom is mounted directly to the truck instead of having that separate second section, if you notice that separate section right there. So what I'm talking about is this section that's on this side. So all the different lift companies have their 1 and 2 section booms. And generally, they are within a foot of each other. But what the difference is where they mount the basket. So some baskets are hanging. You see how this one is here? And when that one's down, it's a hanging basket. And this one also is a hanging basket. So if you look at this other VersaLift over here, see it's perched and the basket is actually hanging. It's not above the boom. So the boom comes out. Some of the newer trucks, they call them 40 foot, but they're actually basically a 36 with a top mounted basket. So in other words, the basket, instead of hanging, would be on top of the boom going upward, and then the boom is just down lower when it's mounted on the truck, and that gives you a higher reach. So typically, you know, the advantages of that, you get more reach, and you get a higher reach. The disadvantages are, you know, sometimes if you swivel the other bucket, you can have more agility. So you can get into places possibly that you might not be able to get into with the basket mounted on top. And another thing is if you're, let's say you're working over an awning, you have that additional bottom part of the boom. So this little end of the boom right here will be on the bottom of your basket. And what that can do is make it a little bit harder to reach downward when you're trying to be over something like an awning. I'm giving you that example so you can kind of see what your disadvantages are of that. So figuring out the right kind of lift you want is kind of really up to you and figuring out what you need. The advantages of this truck over the other. This lift moves way faster than that one. I can set this thing up, I can be in the basket, I can be all the way extended in minutes. That one, although it goes higher and it reaches out further, okay, it takes a little more time to do it because I got the middle section I got to bring up, and then actually the operation is slower on that truck. An All-Tech version of the same truck is a little bit faster. It's a little bit faster to set up and move. So those are things to keep in mind. You know, so I don't know the other trucks, but most of the guys I know have All-Tech or VersaLift. So I don't know that many of the other lines. There's a million different names. And I'm not saying they're all bad. They're all probably pretty good. And then the next thing, you know, once you've figured out what you need, if you need an insulated boom or a non-insulated boom or a single or double. Give you an example. The single is a lot cheaper than the double, okay? And the double is a lot heavier than the single is. So the advantages of the single, it's lighter weight. It uses less fuel to get to the job. The double is going to take more, is heavier. It's going to take more fuel to get to the job. It's going to take you a little longer to set up. So depending on the jobs that you're doing, you know, for me, I would send this truck out to do sign work that's lower, that doesn't have to go over like a long sidewalk or a bunch of parking lot poles or something like that. I have to be further away from the substrate to work on. I would send this truck out to do it because it's faster. Okay. But there's a lot of times when this truck is absolutely necessary because the outward reach of this truck is not enough, or the height. So that one goes 36 foot standing. This one's 29 foot standing. So your actual reach, and what you'll see a lot of places put on their ads is they put the reach height on there. And what you want to know is the standing height. You can always figure out the reach. Reach is about 6 to 8 feet more than the standing. Because most people can't, on myself, I can reach a 8-foot ceiling. So my reach height's going to be different than yours would be. Okay, I can stand up, put my fingers on an 8-foot ceiling. Okay, so those are all things to consider when you're looking at these trucks to buy. When you buy a diesel one, a lot of times they don't come with a generator. When it's gas engine, a lot of times they do. And the generator can either operate, some of these operate off a generator. Let's talk about operation of the lift. Some of these, like this truck here, like this one, operates off the generator, and it also operates on electric power. So I could flip the switch up right here, and that's running electric motor, and I can run all the operations of the lift without even starting the generator. It does operate a little bit faster on the generator and uses less battery because it will run the battery down running this thing all the time. But the nice part about that is if I'm inside a building, when I was inside of a building, I could just run it on this power. And I was in a big warehouse using it, and it would operate on this power, and I could use it in lieu of a scissor lift, which was kind of nice for the job I was doing. So this one has dual power. Not every one of these trucks will have dual power. Most of them only have one, and most of them don't have a stow and unstow for the basket. So the nice thing is this one here can operate off the generator, or it can operate off of the battery, dual power. It also has a stow, so the basket turns this way, which a lot of them just have a gravity basket. The basket just hangs there on a hinge, and you can't move that basket. Sometimes when you're doing sign work or something like that, you want, like I said, when you're working over an awning, sometimes you want what we call Superman the basket, where you turn the basket at an angle of the awning so that you can reach out and work where you are. So keep that in mind when you're going to buy one. If it doesn't have a stow unstow on it, then it probably has a hanging basket, and of course those sell a lot cheaper. Another thing you'll see is one that's called an elbow boom, where it goes out and then it just elbows over. Now those are good for like tree trimming and stuff like that maybe, but for signs and that kind of work, and it's even for tree trimming sometimes, the outward reach of these is better. And that boom, you don't want that thing out in traffic, and you may not have an option to have it not be in traffic when you have an elbow boom. So there's that issue as well. Again, those trucks I've seen a lot cheaper than these, and those are the things that you want to think about when you're going to buy one. Now there's the front stow, and they'll do the same thing with a rear stow, so that the basket will be in the back of the truck when you're driving. You know, the things that are nice about that, it looks a little bit better. I mean, it does look a little nicer, but to me, functionality is your number one thing. Because this is a work truck, you're trying to use it to make money. You want to try and make the most amount of money of your time as you can. The thing that's nice about one that's got a front mounted basket is it's way easier. So you can take a forklift, pull up here, put this little thing down right here, and you can put a pallet of signs back in the back of this truck easily without having to lift the basket up, without having to set up anything. It just goes right in there. It's real nice and easy to do. With a rear mounted stow, okay, that basket is always in the way. And everybody I've ever talked to in the sign business and other trades, they always wish they had a front mounted basket because there's more space to work back here. You can put your equipment in and out. You're not bumping your head on anything. You're going in and out of this one. Unlike this truck, if you notice, it's completely right in the way. Takes a few minutes. You can raise it up and still put the pallet in there on this truck, but some of them have a really narrow area in the back and the basket's over to the side, and you can't get a pallet inside that truck at all. So again, those are things you want to look at when you're looking to buy one, to think about, you know, how am I going to be using this? How's it going to work for me? And things like that. So those are a lot of the different things to know on the lift. Again, if it has two sections, almost any lift company, they're almost all the same. They're within a foot of one another, of outward reach. They're within a foot of each other for height, and depending on where the basket is actually located on the machine tells you how high it actually goes for total height reach. So if you look at it and you see, hey, it's a 40 foot, and you see the baskets on the top, well, you know it's probably the same lift as this one is over here, but the basket's mounted on the top. So you know, if that's going to be an advantage to you, then you know that might be the way to go. And again, you know, sometimes just having the outward reach is what you're looking for, and the outward reach you can get from having the basket mounted the way this is, and it'll be just fine for what you're trying to do. So anyway, let's go on to the cabin chassis portion and talk about cabin chassis and gas versus diesel. Okay, diesel. Okay, that truck, the big truck over here to the right, that truck gets about 11 miles a gallon on the road. And to operate the lift on that, I have to keep the engine idling on that one. So that's kind of a downer. That's how the lift is run, off a PTO. This one here has dual power, okay, and it has a gas engine. Now on the road, on the highway, which I don't usually drive on the highway much, it gets about 8 miles a gallon. And in the city, I have no idea how low it is, but it is not near 8 miles a gallon. It's not very good. Okay, the diesel gets way better gas miles than the gas engine, hands down. But if you live in California, you're gonna know that you're gonna find out probably after you bought it that you're gonna have difficulty registering your older bucket truck. If it's 2010 or newer, you won't. You can get it registered in California for now. I don't know if they're going to change the laws. They're even talking about going all electric. There's all this stuff going on right now here. So it's just becoming more and more of a nightmare for people who own equipment. So anyway, the diesel, if you have 2010 or older, in a year or two, you will not be able to drive more than 1,000 miles a year in that vehicle in California. And they're very strict about it. You have to send in something to a place called Truckers and put in your mileage and all this other stuff. And if you don't do it every January, you're not eligible, and you will not be eligible to drive it at all in the state. So they're very strict on it. Okay, it's not easy. Don't just figure I'm going to buy a diesel, I'm going to try and finagle something, and it's going to work out. It may not. Okay, so on your cabin chassis, commonly you'll find mostly Fords. The reason that is because Ford is the cheapest, so that's why they go with Ford typically. The companies that sell these, every once in a while you'll find a Dodge or a I've seen a few Kodiaks, but they're kind of expensive. That's why a lot of people they'd be special order, and a lot of companies wouldn't buy them. And it's really hard to find a Kodiak for sale. In fact, most of the guys want those because they get about 11-12 miles a gallon on the highway. A little bit better than the Ford, and you can have an automatic transmission without worry about something blowing up on you. So again, the gas, you're not going to get the gas miles with the diesel, hands down. But let's just talk about what you get if you get a 2010 or newer truck, the issues you might run into. Typically they're Ford. Okay, and the Ford had a 6.7 liter engine in 2010 is when around there. I don't know when I think it was 2010 when they came out with it. The early ones had issues with the turbo. Ceramic bearings in the turbo went out, and they would wipe out basically the whole engine because the little ceramic bearing would go in there and the piston would hit it, and basically, implosion from the inside on those. That's the early ones. A lot of them got fixed. They got that problem solved. They had a few other issues. One is the fuel system. They are equipped with a high pressure fuel system along with DPF, diesel particulate filter, and the diesel particulate filters tend to plug up on them. And in California, if your diesel particulate filter plugs up, you better get it fixed. And from what I understand, to repair the diesel particulate filters and put new ones in it, it's about $9,000 in repairs. So yeah, you might think, yeah, I'm getting better gas mileage and whatever, but it's going to get you on the other end when those filters start to plug up. And you got to have all your emissions equipment on your truck here. The other issue is they have a problem with the tappets. And you'd hear like a little tappet noise on the engine. And a lot of the forums will tell you that's no big deal. It doesn't do anything. It's just a noise. Don't worry about it. One of my friends was driving his, using it to tow haul, and he got about in Texas out there, and his tappets finally, the lifters finally collapsed and failed, which we looked up. There is a updated lifter for him. There's so many problems with the 6.7. I can tell you, the list goes on. I'll tell a few more, but his 6.7 ended up with he ended up having to give the truck back because he couldn't fix it. It was too expensive. That repair on a bucket truck. When a bucket truck breaks down, the tow bill is massive. You're not going to call AAA. You call AAA. I did it once. I called AAA. I locked my keys in my truck. I called AAA, and the guy comes out and laughs. He goes, I'm not, nah, dude. I'm like, what? It's just a cabin. He goes, no. You see the lift on there? We don't touch those. All right, it's just so you know, they don't mess with them. If you think you're going to get out and get some AAA tow, it ain't happening. I had a 6-mile tow in this truck. It was $450. I mean, you do not want to break down in one of these. You want to maintain it. You want to keep it really good shape. Because if it breaks down on you, it's going to cost you a truckload of money. So let's go on with the 6.7. Other issues that I've seen, that, like I said, the DPF plugged up on his, the lifters collapsed. The other problem is the fuel system, and I'm only going to go over this one. There's a lot more. There's a lot more on it, and I know you guys are Ford people, just love to write down that I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, they have a CP3 fuel pump. Sorry, a CP4 fuel pump. This is a high pressure pump on my Volkswagen, and I'm putting a CP3 pump on it. It came with the CP4. Here's a couple CP4s right here. I'm going to tell you, every CP4 in anything that I own, I take out. I'm going to put a CP3 in it. But the problem with the Ford truck is the CP3 will not fit in the cavity where the CP4 is. And those guys are going to tell you, well, it's all about running clean fuel and all this other stuff. It's no, there's an engineering problem with them. In my opinion, these have an aluminum casted pump. The CP3 is steel, okay? And with 25,000 pounds that has a high pressure fuel system, 25,000, 30,000 pounds of pressure in there, the aluminum starts to erode where the piston goes up and down. And what happens is over time, the piston goes up and down and it finally just turns sideways. And then when the little roller goes on the cam, it wears out and puts metal shavings into your full system. The typical repair for this is right around $10,000. So that fuel savings you end up getting you in the back end. I mean, hey, listen, if you can find a Dodge chassis, it might be better. I'm not sure, there's some issues on those. The late model 24 valve Dodge have some issues. A lot of that's in the transmissions and rear ends too. The Ford has a good solid rear end and the transmission in the late models is actually pretty good. The early 7.3s, if you were going to get one of those, look for one that's stick shift. It'll eliminate a lot of your problems. Until California outlawed this truck, well, it's not outlawed, it's got 1,000 miles a year it can be used. This was the setup to have. Stick shift, 7.3, especially with the modifications I've done to this, were the absolute bulletproof way to go. Because the 7.3 just didn't have that many issues compared to the others. It has a few, but most of those have been resolved. One I had happen on this was the high pressure line went out, and obviously you can see the oil that's all over this thing. High pressure lines need to be replaced on these and updated. Those braided pressure lines can go out for the oil. These do have their share of oil leaks, which I've chased down and fixed them all. I've actually ended up rebuilding the whole engine eventually on this truck. But the 7.3, if you can find a good one, and you live in a state that allows you to have a diesel, and you don't want to do any work in California, because if you just drive that sucker across the border, they may take it from you and never give it back to you. It's that bad. The old 7.3s and the 6.0, if you did the bulletproof on it, there's some bulletproofing you need to do on the 6.0 if you find one of those. They're good. The 6.4, no. Better do some research on the 6.4 before you go and buy one of those. They got major issues. Everything from the pistons being too thin to turbo problems. I mean, the list goes on. The rods are made out of basically paper, in my opinion. They're just tiny little things. They're just not enough for a diesel engine. And I can probably get almost every Ford owner to agree with me on the 6.4. So if you're looking at one of those, I would just turn your way and go the other way as fast as you can. You're better off buying a V10 or which I don't like those either, or a 460. The old 460s were good that was in that truck. I mean, that truck, other than eating up a lot of gas, it's a really good, reliable, strong running truck. It just, you get what you get. So anyway, I hope that helps you understand a little bit more. Maybe it'll just give you some food for thought to do research before you buy one, and spend some time. You're gonna spend quite a bit of money on one of these trucks, and honestly, you should be doing some research and find out, just look out and see a deal and run and go buy it. Really try and do some research, because I'm going to tell you, when I bought my trucks, before I ever drove them, I put both of these trucks, I put more than $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 in parts, and I do all my own work on them. So before I ever drove them, I bought them. They were phone company rejects, and you think, hey, those are a good deal. I tell you right now, if you can't do the service on it, don't buy one of those. It's going to cost you a ton of money. It's going to cost you a ton of money to have somebody fix that truck to where it's reliable, or you're going to spend a ton of money on tow bills. And either one of those things is just not the way to go. Look for one that's been maintained by someone for a long period of time, and like when I sell either one of these trucks, they are good vehicles that I've maintained and kept and took care of. Not like some phone company reject where they had a fleet mechanic working on it and he didn't give a rip, he just wanted to get his paycheck on Friday. Now there is another option. What I switched to is one of these. For me, it's worked out great. There are a lot of disadvantages. I've had to turn down several jobs because I can't get close enough to the building to work on it. So there are disadvantages to these trailer booms. Registration is nothing. Insurance is cheaper. I get 14 miles a gallon pulling this. So for me, because I drive literally all over the state, this has been the go-to. The bucket trucks were great. They're fast to set up. If you're in the sign installation business, they're really fast and easy to set up. This takes a little longer to set up, but the gas mileage I save and the ability to drive all over the state where I have to and get better gas mileage has paid off for me, because I can pull it with, in my opinion, one of the best diesel engines you can buy was a Duramax. I can pull it with this, and some guys will disagree, say Duramax are no good. I mean, everybody I know who has one of these after they've had the others, they just know what they've got. And friends of mine that had Fords, they had the 6.7, they had Dodges, they had all the other stuff. As long as you don't do anything to it and power chip it and do all that stuff, this truck here will get better gas mileage and be more reliable than just about any truck you can buy. That is, when you package it up with the Allison transmission and all the other stuff that's in there. It has its share of issues as well, but in my opinion, they're quite a bit less. The gas mileage is quite a bit better. I think Dodge makes a really good, or Cummins makes a real good diesel, but the newer ones, I guess, are better with the transmission and stuff like that. But the earlier ones had major transmission issues and a lot of rear end problems, so that I don't have with the Chevy. So that's why I have it, because it works good for me. So it's up to you on that. Again, anyway, I just thought I'd just throw these out there, maybe to help you figure out how to do the research you need to buy what you're looking for and figure out what you need and move on with your life and start making money. Talk to you in the next one. Please like, share, and subscribe.